Okay, there we go. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn on a collaboration series that we're starting. Today, we're going to start with occupational therapy. My name is Lisa Davison, and I'm a facilitator for LOTR, and I serve the northern and central part of the state. I'm also an occupational therapist, and I've been in the school setting for about 27 years. I'm joined today by my coworker, Tracy, and she'll be monitoring the chat box. So if you have any questions or comments, you can drop them in there, and we'll do our best to answer them during the webinar or at the end as time allows. So who are we? LOTR is the Louisiana Autism Spectrum and Related Disabilities Project within the Human Development Center at LSU Health Science Center in New Orleans. We support students, teachers, and districts throughout the state by providing professional development, action planning, and coaching related to the education of students with disabilities. The Human Development Center is the University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities for Louisiana and serves as a resource to people with disabilities, families, service providers, educators, and policymakers. From individuals to systems, HDC builds capacity and inspires change throughout the life cycle to ensure that people with disabilities are able to fully participate in all aspects of community life. We have a website that's lotr.org, and we have a variety of printable visual supports under the online resources tab, as well as an Ask LOTR feature that's at the top where you can submit a question and one of our facilitators will respond with an answer to your question. You can also find all of the Lunch and Learn videos that we're doing under the News tab as well. So today we're just going to talk about OT and collaboration with OT in the educational setting. We're also going to talk about some ways to incorporate movement within your classroom to improve student engagement and participation, and then some strategies to implement a sensory space within the classroom. So let's start with what school-based OT is. It's a related services that is under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, and it addresses the physical, cognitive, self-regulation, and adaptive skills areas. The goal is to reduce barriers to allow students to participate in the educational setting. And we do that through activity and environmental analysis and by accommodating and modifying environments so that students can fully participate. So how are the services provided? They should be provided within the natural setting or routine in the least restrictive environment to the maximum extent possible. They also should be provided collaboratively as part of the IEP team. And we're looking at adapting activities and environments, making sure our students are independent in their daily living skills. And that translates also into employment and community integration as well. Problem solving for assistive technology so students have access to the curriculum and their educational program, promoting positive behaviors and interactions within the school setting, collaborating to address self-regulation, and then coaching, training, and providing resources for school personnel and families. So why this model? Well, research shows that practicing a new skill in the setting where it naturally occurs is the most beneficial for developing new skills. We're seeing through research that pulling students out of the classroom for therapy is not the best practice based on the research. It's also the law through IDEA. It also benefits the learners because they are able to participate fully in school by being present in the actual setting. And it gives consistency in addressing students' needs when the teachers and adults can carry over therapy strategies throughout the day. And that doesn't always occur if the therapy is taking place in isolation or in silos. Teachers and therapists also benefit because teachers can observe the therapist model the interventions, and then they can generalize those interventions to other settings and other situations. The therapists have a better understanding of a student's ability and challenges in the natural setting, which allows for us to be able to improve effectiveness of our recommendations when they're more relevant to what is expected in the classroom and throughout the campus. So you really have a close-up, real-time view of what's going on. So what does that look like? Let's look at some examples of what it might look like when services are provided in the natural environment. and OT is able to give direct feedback and recommendations. So when we're looking at the physical area with fine motor, if an OT is in the classroom and the teacher is providing, let's say, a worksheet, and you have a student that has some fine motor difficulties and they have a worksheet that has no writing lines on it. So if OT's in the classroom, you can show teachers ways to modify that worksheet. It also gives them the modeling, gives them the opportunity to see that some of the things that we recommend are not necessarily time and labor intensive. They're real simple strategies you can do as you walk around the classroom. So highlighting lines, highlighting words or letters for the student to trace are not time intensive, and they can be incorporated in the classroom. And so when OT's in the classroom and seeing what needs to be done with a specific lesson, you're going to get better carryover. Also, we can see the adaptations that we have recommended: pencil grips, adaptive paper. How is that really working in the classroom? Can the student really manage those adaptations and those modifications? Posturally, when we're looking at seating and position, while the students are actually engaged in educational activities, rather than what those needs look like in a contrived situation in another room where there's minimal distractions or it's set up in an ideal situation. So when we are in the classroom, we can get more generalization of those recommendations and those skills when we're there, kind of problem solving on in real time and on the go. So when we look at the cognitive area, we can support the use of assistive technology to allow access to the curriculum. So modeling that in the classroom in real time is much more effective than if you are doing it in a classroom off to the side, and then you bring that back to the teacher and say, hey, do this, this, and this. I know a lot of times when I'm explaining something, I may leave out a step or a crucial little bit of information that I wouldn't have left out if I'm actually modeling and demonstrating that. And so I think sometimes when we have our discipline specific lingo, we think people kind of understand what we're talking about because it's so common knowledge to us. But yet when we're meeting people that maybe are new teachers or unfamiliar with the terminology and the things we're saying, it doesn't necessarily translate. And so when you're in the classroom and you're modeling how to use that assistive technology so that they can access the curriculum, it's going to stick better. When we look at adaptive skills in the classroom, in those natural routines, we can modify the actual process that the student is actually expected to complete for say like toileting or a daily living skill versus practicing it outside of the classroom and then trying to bring that into the classroom when the routine might not be the exact same, or the setup of the classroom might not be the same. Provision and modeling the use of adaptive equipment. Again, that modeling it and the teacher seeing how you use it in the classroom is much more beneficial, and you get more consistency. When we model social skills, let's say in the cafeteria or at recess, it allows paraprofessionals or your cafeteria monitors to see how they can include students with diverse needs in conversations or socially redirect them and guide them to more appropriate conversation, how to start conversations, all the different elements of a conversation. But when we model that, people see how to carry that over. So when we're looking at self-regulation and sensory, we can look at whole group classroom strategies. So if your OT is in the classroom, as OT, you're in the classroom, and you can monitor levels of alertness and call the teacher's attention, and they can see how you can address levels of alertness proactively versus reactively. And sometimes, like I said, it doesn't translate when you're having a conversation. And so there's benefit to being in the classroom and working alongside the teacher and the paraprofessional that's in there to show them how to monitor those levels and strategies to redirect and help those students to become more engaged. And then sometimes when we have to do the individual strategies, such as the home base or the chill out area, chill out zone, whatever that location is called, having specific things in that area that are individualized that the teacher can use, and then showing the teacher how to direct the student to use those appropriately. So like I said, the research is showing that teaching new skills in the actual naturally occurring environment is best practice. Certainly, I think there are times where you're going to pull a student to work on a skill and be able to dedicate some specific time to a certain skill. But I think we always want to go back into the classroom and make sure that what we taught in isolation can translate and generalize into that educational setting. I think that's very important. And I can say back beginning of my early career, we did all pull out, and I would be like, well, they can do it, and I missed the piece of they can do it with no distractions. They can do it in isolation. But what does that look like in the real world, in the classroom setting? And so I think we need to really be sure that we're having those discussions with our OTs and as teachers, making sure that we're not creating an environment where therapists don't feel like they can come in and support your classroom. So I think it does take some preparation and some collaboration beforehand so that it is a successful strategy and for the benefit of our students. So what I just kind of gave you was just some basic examples of how OT can function kind of in the classroom. But since sensory and self-regulation seems to be a real high need area across the state, I'm going to go into some more specific ideas on how to create movement activities to maximize students' level of alertness, regulation, and participation. And the thing about self-regulation and sensory strategies and level of alertness and regulation and all those terms that we use for that is not just for students with disabilities. We have students that are undiagnosed ADHD. I think the technology that we're using now is great, but I think kids are having a harder time. We're seeing more kids that have difficulty attending and sitting still. And so certainly these are going to be some whole class ideas to keep everybody engaged. So you can implement a whole class strategy to determine your students' level of alertness. You can certainly use a scale like the one you see here that's how does your engine run? That's a commercially available program. You don't have to do that degree. You can use hand gestures or signals for students to check in on where they are. If they're too high, they're active, they're fidgety, they're off task. One of the goals of regulation is for students to start knowing where they're at before they get too high or too low. And you see the evidence in the fidgety activeness, or if they're too low, the yawning, the slouching, kind of being zoned out, staring off. And so in your class, you're going to have kids that are too high, kids that are too low, kids that are just right. And so, I mean, it'd be great if we had a class full of just right, but that's not realistic. So we're going to have those too high, too low. And so we need to have some strategies where we move them through some active alerting activities. And then we regroup and calm so that we can sit down and then do our activity. So the research is showing that students should not sit more than 60 minutes. Some of it is saying more 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the age. And these movement breaks that we're talking about, they're only 2 to 3 minutes. But that 2 to 3 minutes of movement can yield up to 45 minutes of increased focused attention in our students. And that's pretty significant and impactful. So keep that in mind. With a lot of these things, we're not talking about, we are going to talk about some movement activities that you can incorporate in your lesson, but these movement breaks just have to be 2 to 3 minutes. Some other things I think where OT can collaborate with you and be very impactful in providing a valuable input on your classroom environment and student placement within the classroom. So if you have a student that is struggling, they're kind of low, they're having trouble staying focused. Place those students near the window or a door where there's more light, there's more noise, there's more stimulation. And then those students that are too stimulated, place them maybe in a darker, quieter area of the classroom away from the stimulation. You can always put those shades over some of your lights to soften the light. And you might have areas of your room where you have those shades and areas where you don't, and place your students according to what their need is. And that's certainly an area where your OT can give you some input. So using movement in lessons. So I'm going to give y'all some websites in just a minute and some resources for some movement break type things. But if you're not sure you want to use movement breaks, incorporate movement within your lessons. So you can use a this or that strategy. So if you're asking questions about a specific topic or whatever, stomp if you think it's this answer, or hop if it's that answer. If you don't, you can do movement without getting out of your chair. But I do think you need to get out of the chair some. But you still can incorporate movement on a smaller scale in a seated position. True false, divide your room into true false sides and have students move to whatever side if they think the answer is true or false. And so specifically, like looking at phonics, parts of speech, and spelling, you can segment words with movements. And I know a lot of our curriculums have the hand signals, and you might do the fist, the fist bumps, not bumps, fist pumps, and the different things through the curriculum. But you also can stomp. You can also do jabs that cross midline as you segment your words. Crossing midline is a skill that is a prerequisite skill for reading and for handwriting, because it does that move from left to right across the page as you're reading. And a lot of our kids and our students that are we're more sedentary now on technology, aren't out as active, and so they're having difficulty with crossing midline. And so that is a way to engage them in some crossing midline activity. They can stomp out the syllables. You can place vocabulary or spelling words on the note cards throughout the room, and students can move around the room and define or spell the words to each other. For story recall are important aspects of a story that you want to focus in on. You can jump or stretch to the ceiling if the comment or the discussion is about the setting. Clap if it's for the main character. Or whatever your topic is that you're trying to focus on for the day. For social stories, you can use skits to act out historical events. In math, practice skip counting with your students as manipulatives. Not saying don't use manipulatives on your desk, but if you have your students lined up and they number off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you can skip count 2, 4, 6, 8. Those students can move forward and back or whatever, depending on what your skill is. You can teach grouping and multiplication using your students. For science, create the solar system using your students. Have them orbit around the moon within your classroom. Some other, sorry. So while there's much research on the benefits to movement and the positive impact it has on our cognitive abilities, movement can be a challenge. So let's just talk about the elephant in the room. Sometimes we feel like if we let our kids up and we get them moving around the room, we'll lose control of them and of the classroom. Some of us like a quiet, sedentary classroom, and that's okay. But since we know movement enhances learning, let's start small with a stand and stretch activity or a Simon Says activity. That's a guided activity that you are in control of. It's structured. You're not just letting kids up run around the room. We always want to teach our expectations. I think sometimes we teach them and we think they know what to do. But I need that reminder that it's only 55 down the interstate. And I need that pretty regularly, or next thing I know, there's red lights in my rearview mirror and I'm doing 80 down the interstate. So while I know what the speed limit is, sometimes I need those visual references to remind me. And I think that's the same thing with our students. Yes, they know what to do, but I think we need to teach and reteach our expectations. So if we're going to participate, we're going to start a movement activity. Remember, when we get up and we're going to do the true false, we use our walking feet when we're moving around the room. We use our whisper voice. If you're doing the spelling activity, remember, friends, we find different friends every time we transition so that we work with different people. Incorporating your visual supports. If you've worked with any of us at LOTR, you know that we are very proactive with visual supports. They remind students of the rules and expectations. And so we definitely want to be sure that we are incorporating those visual supports. Here are some websites that have great options for alerting and calming videos that you can use for your class. So I think Tracy's going to drop those in the chat box, and you can copy them or, and look them up, or the video will be posted in a few days and you can pull those up as a reminder. Oh, I'm so sorry. Ugh. Okay, so one of the things about the calming videos, when you have your students, they've come back from lunch or recess or PE or music, and they're hyped up. You bring them back to the classroom. You could do a calming video, but another strategy that you could use is also on your route back to the classroom. We're walking slow like a robot, or on our tippy toes, or we're doing stretches. When we get to the end of the hallway and we're going to turn left, we're going to do stretches just to kind of regulate them and help them calm and come back down to where when they get back to the classroom, they're able to sit. So sometimes if we do an activity and they get alerted and you feel like they're kind of too high, let's do that calming video or calming activity to bring them back down so that they can then sit. Because we do have those kids that when we do let them start moving, they really want to go, and get overstimulated. And so being very structured, again, teaching the students that what we expect when we put on our Go Noodle or our brain break video, we stay in our spot. We don't run around the room, and we do what the person on the video is doing. So flexible seating options are great ways to give students movement who need movement. And again, we have to teach them how to use them safely and correctly. We might have a visual support up there that says when we're on flexible seating, our bottom stays on the bouncy ball. Our bouncy ball movements are very small. They're not big. We're not bouncing. We're just, small bounces. One of the things I think that's important here is when we make them sit still, we're shutting down their ability to regulate and to remain alert. Those moving students that we take recess from is really counterproductive. So I caution you, if you're taking recess or making students stand on the wall for recess because they've been moving in class, I would strongly suggest you relook at that. They need the movement. So let them do some jumping jacks, do running, sensory hallway. If you have those in your class, in your school, let them do that during recess. That's a great way to get movement in a structured, controlled way. So be cautious of those students that are kind of constantly moving, taking away their recess or making them sit, because they really are doing that to try to help themselves regulate and remain alert. You do want to give it in a structured way. So that's why I was kind of saying, have them do jumping jacks, running, sprints, that kind of thing. So it's structured and controlled. So for our students who need a more specific intervention and strategies, having a classroom area or an area in your home, if we have parents on here, is a great way to provide an area for them to regulate. And so again, if you've been familiar with LOTR or you've seen our videos, we like visual supports. So a student who's having trouble regulating, and that you've said, let's go to the chill zone for a few minutes because you see them getting dysregulated, because we really want it to be a proactive strategy, not a reactive strategy. So we were trying to get them to that area to regulate and get reorganized before they have a disruptive behavior. So you could use a first, next, then, and how long. And so you could have choices for them to pick from. They're going to, first I'm going to do this activity for 1 minute. And the chill zone area is not for the whole time that you're in teaching your ELA lesson. It's for 5-10 minutes, and then we're back into class. And so using a visual timer helps the student know when it's time to go back to class. It's also a visual reminder to the teacher that your student is back there, and that they've not come, that they need to come back to class. Because as teachers, we're teaching and we get it's easy to get sidetracked and forget that Johnny is back there. And so the timer is a visual reminder for us as well. This is an example of a chill zone checklist. And so on the right, you have the different activities. And so the student can check in with how they're feeling and then what activities they need to help them get regulated. They would plug them in, and then they would add the check marks as they're finished. This type of system also gives the student choice, and making choices empowers the student, and starts the process of regaining regulation just by getting back there and making choices. It's also a great tool in teaching self-monitoring and self-regulation, which is our goal. And so this is kind of what it looks like when the student picks what they would like to do. You can also add a time feature, 1 minute for each activity, and with your timer as well. This is the example of how am I feeling when I check in. And you could differentiate your activities if you're blue, yellow, red. Hopefully we're going, before we get to red, we're hopefully getting into that chill zone or calm down area. The thing about our strategies is what does taking deep breaths look like? We might want to add in a visual of what does that mean? Doing the deep breath rainbow. So engaging in these types of activities helps the student regulate by focusing their mind and thoughts on more calming activities. So the deep breath rainbow, this is on our website. You can also do the senses check, where you think about 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel. And so you have these posted in that area so that number one, they know what to do, and then they know how to do it. This is the mindful senses, and it's similar to check your senses, but this is a great visual for students who might need a little bit more support to complete an activity. So they would just select what they see, what they hear, feel, smell, and taste. And so I think in wrapping up, because we're almost out of time, I think research shows that movement works. And so I think we need to, be structured in what we're doing. Start small if you're not using movement, and be sure that you are setting your expectations. You can also collaborate with your OT on activities for your classroom because they'll be more familiar with your students. And so when OT and school and teachers collaborate, it really benefits, and it's a really good situation for our students to grow and to have an environment where they can really thrive. So at this time, if there's any questions, I don't know if there's anything in the chat box. If not, thanks for joining us today. If you could take a minute to complete our training survey, you can use your phone on the QR code, or we'll drop the link into the chat box. Also put on your calendar to join us as we continue the collaboration series next month on June the 12th, where we're going to be talking about deaf, hard of hearing, and visual impairment strategies as a collaborative tool. Let's see, it says, will we get copies of the slides? The video will be on our LOTR website, so you can rewatch the video. I don't think there's copies of the slides. But if you email me, my email address is on there. We could probably email you a copy of the slides if you want to email me at ldav45@lsuhsc.edu. Thanks for joining us today, and reach out if you have any questions. Again, like on our LOTR.org, we have that ask a facilitator a question, or you can reach out to me either way.